you what your needs are and how you are going to take your learnings from the program forward. I'd also, so we have Peter Bregman with us here this afternoon. And I got to know Peter Bregman very early on in my coaching career as I got introduced to his book, 18 Minutes, that changed my whole perspective on how you manage time. Peter is recognized as the #1 executive coach in the world by leading global coaches. He coaches CEOs and senior leaders in many of the world's premier organizations. He started his career teaching leadership on wilderness and mountaineering expeditions, and he tells me that he's also a coach, a ski coach, and he's spending his distancing and isolation time up in the mountains skiing. What a healthy way to spend the time. He is also the CEO of Bregman Partners, an executive coaching company that helps successful people become exceptional leaders and stellar human beings. His recent book, Leading with Emotional Courage, How to Have Hard Conversations, Create Accountability, and Inspire Action on Your Most Important Work, is worth a good read. I could go on and talk about Peter and maybe write a book on him, but I want him to take the floor, so I will just say to you to join me as he speaks to us this afternoon. And he really is walking the talk with emotional courage, as despite a bereavement that he just experienced last week, he has come here to join us, and he's speaking to us from New York, and he will talk to us about emotional courage and coaching, the key to helping your clients get massive traction on their most important work, even in a pandemic. You can put your questions in the chat line. I shall monitor the chat line, and periodically we will stop and answer your questions. I might not be able to get to everybody's question because there's so many of you online. I see we have 136 participants. That's wonderful. Over to you, Peter.
Thank you, Rosemary, so much. And one correction I'll make, unfortunately, is that I'm at our ski house, but I'm not actually skiing. Unfortunately, in fact, I'll let you see kind of out the window. There's not a lot of snow anymore. It's actually supposed to snow this weekend, but it's not going to be enough for skiing. So I'm here, but I'm not skiing. And I apologize for the background of a closet door, but when I show you the background of the trees and things like that, the backlight darkens my face. So you're stuck with me and a closet door. Thank you for having me. Thank you all for being here. And I was just thinking as I was preparing for this and just talking with my wife right now before coming on, that I love teaching coaching so much, and I sort of had stopped doing it. I ran a coach training program for many years, just running it a couple of times a year, and a couple of years ago, or maybe it was last year, I stopped, and I'm focusing really on leadership. But this makes me think, just preparing for this and thinking about it made me think, maybe I should boot that up and do it remotely while we're all in the pandemic. So it kind of energized me to think of this conversation, and thank you all for being here and being a part of it. Okay, I'm going to share my screen, and I'm actually going to try something we tried yesterday and didn't work, but then I tried it this morning and it did. So I'm going to try just sharing the keynote presentation, and we're going to see if that works. And if that works, if for some reason it stops working, Rosemary, if you could just let me know if it's not moving forward on the slides. But I was preparing for another speech that I'm giving next week, and we managed to get it to work. Okay, so I'm going to start with a experiment. I'm going to say a word, I'm going to ask you to repeat the word with me 10 times. I know we're all on mute, but do it out loud if you're able to do it out loud to yourself in your room. Just do it out loud. And then I'm going to ask you a question, and I'm going to ask you to answer that question as quickly as possible without thinking. Okay? So the word is silk, and I'm going to ask us to say it together. Ready? Silk, 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 silk. Quick, what does a cow drink? Just say it out loud to yourself. What does a cow drink? Okay, so most of you, many of you probably will have said milk. A cow drinks water. A cow makes milk, but a cow drinks water. So why do we do that? Why do, like maybe you've heard it before, by the way, and you didn't fall for it. Maybe you didn't fall for it because you know what cows drink. But I want to consider for a moment why many of us might have said no. This is what happens, and this is what we do in life. An event happens, right? Let's say you yell at me in the hall. That event creates a reaction. I yell back, and that reaction creates an outcome. We're in a fight, right? And event, reaction, outcome is often how we operate in the world. I'm reacting to events that are happening. And my reactions are habitual. Silk, 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 milk. Right? They're habitual reactions. We react out of habit. By the way, a lot of times it works, right? A lot of times the habits we have are effective, and it allows us to save energy, to be efficient by following our habits. But here's what really successful people do, because a lot of times it doesn't work. They create space between the event and the reaction. You yell at me, I pause, even just for 4 seconds. I wrote a book called 4 Seconds about this, right? 4 seconds, because all we need is enough time to subvert the amygdala reaction that causes us to just respond emotionally to something. It only takes about 2 seconds to do that. So I'm being generous when I say 4 seconds. So pause for 4 seconds, breathe, which frankly is a good idea anyway, and I encourage it. But specifically in this situation, I would say take a deep breath and think. And I want you to think for a second, what are you thinking about? So just put yourself in that scenario. Someone's just yelled at you. You pause, you breathe, and you think. And think about in that moment, say to yourself even, like, what is it that you're thinking about in that moment? And people think about all sorts of things. When I do this in speeches and it's live and I'm hearing what people are saying and they're telling me that they're thinking about, how they're going to react or why the person's yelling or what they should say next and all of those things. And all of those things are good, but I would say not yet. What the most successful people do is they pause, they breathe, and they think about the outcome that they want. And they only act based on the outcome, not based on the event. So I choose what to do. When you yell at me, I choose what to do, not based on what just happened, not based on the past, but based on the future I'm trying to create. The first question I always ask myself is, what is the outcome I want? So I'm not doing silk, 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 milk, right? I'm doing, what does a cow drink? And I'm backing into water. I'm backing into water as opposed to driving forward from silk, right? And when we're coaching, this is incredibly useful because we are a tool to help people subvert their habitual reactions, right? To do things that are more effective and productive for them in the moment. So I want to hold this model because we're going to keep coming back to it. This is an elemental model to what we're doing. Quick story I want to share. I was facilitating coaching group. I was coaching the CEO and the leadership team of a group that had done very, very well organizationally. There was a fast growing startup company. Every quarter was better than the last, except for this one quarter where they stalled out. And so we pulled a meeting together to sort of talk about what went wrong and how do we want to approach it next. How do we want to subvert the trend so that we can keep going back up again. So the first person to speak in the meeting was the head of sales. And he said, obviously we could have made more sales, but the problem was marketing didn't give us any new messages to share and looked at marketing. And then the marketing person, turned a little red and said, yeah, we didn't really have much to share. That's true, because, we didn't get anything new from product. So we have nothing new to share. We're not going to invent stuff. And then product says, yeah, no, I totally get that. That's true. We don't invent stuff either, though. Engineering invents the stuff. So when engineering gives us somehow they managed to blame HR at some point, and they kind of just sort of went around the circle and everyone blamed everyone else. And I was quiet, right? Sometimes the best thing we can do as a coach is to be quiet, but I was quiet. And then I looked at the head of sales, and he was a great guy, actually. And he had fallen into a habit. It's this habit that we have of avoiding blame for things. It's a very typical habit, right? I mean, my 10-year-old son was in the kitchen. I walked into the kitchen, and he's 12 now, but this was when he was 10. He literally had chocolate all over his face. And I just looked at him. I didn't say anything. And he looked at me, chocolate all over his face. He looked at me, and without any prompt from me, he said, I didn't need any chocolate. And I laughed. I said, look, Daniel, like that might or may not be true. I didn't ask you if you ate any chocolate, but why don't you go look in the mirror and then come back and tell me the same thing. And he goes into the bathroom and he looks in the mirror and he comes back like 20 seconds later, sparkling clean face. And he said, I didn't eat any chocolate. But it's this gut response we have to feeling culpable is to avoid culpability. That's our silk. That's our habitual response. So I just looked at the head of sales, with sort of raising some eyebrows. And then he got it very, very quickly. And he raised his hand to stop not because he needed to speak, but not that he needed to raise his hand to speak, but to stop the action. And he said, listen, I started this, so I kind of want to change the direction here. He said, there are 3 things I can think of that I did and my team did last quarter that contributed to the flattening of our sales, flattening of the curve, which means so much nowadays, but the flattening of the curve that was going up. And here's what they are. And here's 3 things I want to commit to doing next quarter. Now, it seems so easy and obvious when I say it, but it was like a cultural seismic shift in the room, because everybody was trying to they were trying to answer the question, what went wrong, but they're trying to answer the question by pointing at someone else in order to save face, in order to avoid the shame, in order to avoid the feeling that, maybe they might get fired or they were responsible. And as a result, they weren't actually achieving the objective. They weren't getting to the outcome. And it took one brave person to be able to go, hold on, I'm responsible. Here's what I'm responsible for. Now, one of the fears is everybody around the table would look at him and say, finally, we got it. Yes. We found out who's responsible. Let's go back to work. Right. And everybody would just blame it on him and be able to walk away. But that's not what happened, because he changed the tone and he changed the dynamic. Whereas before it might have felt shameful to own something, now it felt shameful not to. And so the head of marketing said, hold on, it's not all you. I could think of several things I did last quarter that contributed, and here's what I want to do next quarter. And suddenly everybody, like dominoes, were going around the room owning everything that they could possibly own. So that was emotional courage. That's an emotionally courageous move to make, to take blame and own something. And what I want to talk a lot about is emotional courage, because we need emotional courage in ourselves as coaches to have difficult conversations with people. And we need to develop emotional courage in our clients, because that's what holds them back. So I want to spend a couple of minutes making the case for emotional courage. And then I want to actually talk about some real tools that we can use as coaches that can boost our own emotional courage and can help develop emotional courage in our clients so that they can take action on what's most important to them. So first, I want to define coaching, which is a reliable process to help clients get massive traction on their most important work. So when I think about, I mentioned our coach training, which I may or may not ever run again, but it was the way we always taught it was a day on a reliable process. It should work every time. You should have a process that every single time you sit down with a client, you help them move forward, massive traction. You help them demonstrably move forward on what's most important to them. There are a number of things that we do, and there's a number of things that we don't do, both of which get in the way of our achieving this, of our helping clients get massive traction on their most important work. So what we need to do as coaches, we are most valuable as coaches when we have a reliable process that helps clients get massive traction on their most important work. That's how I define coaching. So I want you to do a thought experiment now. Think of a client who is having a hard time getting traction. A client who's having a hard time getting traction on something that's important to them. Okay, so have in mind, like actually think of a client that is not moving forward the way that they should. And it could be on something as simple as a difficult conversation. I often think of a difficult conversation or anything else that they're procrastinating on or not moving forward on. Now, I want you to consider some questions. What is stopping them? What is stopping them from moving forward? I bet they know everything they need to know in order to move forward. I bet they are perfectly skilled enough to move forward. And by the way, with knowledge and skill, it's very, very easy to fill in those gaps if those are gaps. So I'm crossing them off as gaps. I bet that they've had enough time. And I bet they have opportunity. So those are the things that we usually solve for, right? Knowledge, skill, time, and opportunity. We help clients with calendar. Oh, well, put it on your calendar. Make sure that you do it. There is actually a lot of research that says putting it on your calendar makes a big difference. And I actually talk about that in my book, 18 Minutes, that Rosemarie talked about at the beginning. Deciding when and where you're going to do something is very, very useful in terms of getting it done. But that is not what stops people, right? Knowledge doesn't stop. When in organizations, we spend all of our time developing people's knowledge and skill so that they can follow through. Knowledge and skill is not what stops them. So what stops them is emotional courage. What is emotional courage? It's the willingness to feel. If you are willing to feel everything, if you're willing to feel everything, you can do anything, right? So I want to very quickly distinguish this from emotional intelligence, right? Because a lot of people talk about emotional intelligence, and emotional intelligence, in my view, has totally missed the boat. Well, totally missed the boat is maybe strong, but we've been talking about emotional intelligence for 25, 30 years, and we haven't actually seen people grow in their capability of following through on what's most important to them. So my question would be why? Well, here's why. What emotional intelligence does is it breaks life into these 4 quadrants: what I know and what I do about myself and others. So what I know is self-awareness. How aware am I of myself? What I do is how effective am I at managing myself? About others, it's social awareness. What do I know and understand about other people? And in terms of what I do, it's about relationship management, right? Now, I want to do 30 seconds on brain science, right? This is very, very simplified brain science. There's your spinal cord. You have a limbic system and a rational neocortex system. So your amygdala is your center of feeling, right? Your amygdala is the part of your brain that feels. It's the reptilian part. It's the oldest part of your brain. Your neocortex is the seat of reason and logic and thoughtfulness. So when I talked about those 4 seconds that you need, what you're doing is you're subverting your amygdala reaction in order to tap into your neocortex, your rational center of thought and reason. So if I feel like yelling, I'm going to take a breath and I'm going to slow myself down so that I don't get an amygdala hijack, and I can actually think about what is the response that I want to achieve, right? So that's the game of what we're doing. Well, here's the problem with emotional intelligence. Right? It covers what I know and what I do. The biggest problem is what we know very, very well is that there's something called a knowing doing gap. When I work with CEOs and leadership teams, when I'm coaching a CEO, I never have to worry about do they know enough. What I have to worry about is, are they following through on what they know? That's the challenge. And as coaches, that's our challenge. Our challenge is to help people close the gap between what they know and what they do. So I could know everything about myself and you, and I could be totally capable about managing myself and managing you. And yet, if I don't close the gap between what I know and what I actually follow through on, all of my knowledge will sit in my head enjoying its brilliance, but without impacting anything in the world. So what closes that gap? Emotional courage, the willingness to feel. If I have a difficult conversation that I'm not having, right? Why am I not having it? It's because there's something I might have to feel. If I have a hard conversation with you, I might have to feel conflict. I might have to feel aggressiveness, your aggressiveness, mine. I might have to feel defensiveness. I might have to feel shame or embarrassment. You might come back at me and I might have to feel my own anger. I might have to feel that weird passive aggressiveness that comes after having a hard conversation, and everybody smiles and said, yeah, thank you so much for the feedback. That's really great. And then they don't talk to you for 6 months. Like that, those are the things I might have to feel. And again, if I am willing to feel everything, then I can do anything. If I'm willing to feel all of those things, the shame, the embarrassment, the disconnection, the conflict, the passive aggressiveness, if I'm willing to feel those things, then I could move forward on what's most important to me. If I'm not, then I will not take action that will lead me to feel those things. And I'm going to get stopped in my tracks. So emotional courage underlies our ability to act in the world. So great, theoretically great, I wanted to test it. So I started and I wanted to explore two things. One is, A, can you develop it? Maybe some of us have it and some of us don't. And B is, if you develop it, does it translate into results and outcomes? Those are the two things I wanted to test. So I created a leadership intensive. In fact, the coach training was built off of the leadership intensive. The leadership intensive was the original training program that I created to answer those two questions. And I brought in people, and they came for reasons like this. They came because they wanted to stop shrinking from or avoiding conflict. They wanted to connect with people in a powerful way with both heart and mind. They wanted to take their teams to the next level. Like, think about your clients. Like, are these things that your clients want, right? I would guess that they are. So we did this 4-day super intensive program. The number one comment people gave was, had I known what we were going to do over the last 4 days, I never would have come. And, which by the way, makes it very hard to market. But the second thing they said made it easier to market, which is, it's the best thing I've ever done in my life. And by the way, you guys know this, you're coaches, but those two things always go together. You will never have the best experience of your life unless you go places that you never thought you would go otherwise. Like, that's life, right? That we will not have experiences we've never imagined our ability to have before unless we go to places we never imagined we'd be able to go before, right? So we did it. And then 8 months after the intensive, 8 months, without any interim intervention from us. So we didn't coach them in the process. We just gave them the 4-day leadership intensive. Then we sent an assessment to them and people around them whenever we could, asking them a series of questions. And it was on a 7-point Likert scale. So -3 to 0 to +3. They got worse, no change, they got better. And these are the questions he asked. Did this person get worse, same, or better at raising heart to talk about issues in a way that initiates important conversations? Did they take risks that could lead to new possibilities? Did they connect with people in a way, are they connecting more, less, or the same in a way that inspires their commitment? Do they stay grounded in the face of success, failure, or uncertainty? Do they communicate skillfully in the presence of strong emotions? Do they drive? Are they the same, worse, or better at driving the most critical business results and their overall leadership effectiveness? And in every single case, for every single person, in every question that we asked, people were more effective or much more effective in every single one of these questions 8 months later than they were before they came to the intensive. So the answer is yes. If you are willing to feel everything, you can do anything. That's the answer. The answer is emotional courage is a key that unlocks people's ability. Now you're going to go back to my thesis. Coaching is a reliable process that helps clients get massive traction on their most important work. Emotional courage is a key that helps clients get massive traction on their most important work. It's the missing link. Okay, so how do we help clients do it? There are 4 elements, and this is I go into a lot of depths in this, obviously, in my book, Leading with Emotional Courage. There's 4 elements. Confidence in self, which is not arrogance. Arrogance is actually the opposite of confidence. Arrogance is insecurity. So confidence in yourself is your ability to stay grounded in the face of uncertainty, ambiguity, failure, success. It's, I liken it to sort of subway surfing. I grew up in New York, and we would stand on subways and not hold anything, and the subway would lurch left and right and stop and start. And the goal was not to lose your footing, right? That's the goal of life. Like, life is sort of one big subway surfing game. The second element is connection to others, right? Connection to others ultimately comes down to, am I able to see people and hear them and help them have an experience of being seen and heard? Coaches tend to be very good at this. Here's what we tend to be a little less good at sometimes, which is, am I willing to be seen and heard also? Like, am I willing to put myself out there and be vulnerable, not just help our clients put themselves out there and be vulnerable? We generally are pretty good at this. Here's the place that we get a little less good. These elements are not, it's not a behavioral personality assessment. Like, yeah, I'm strong in this and weak in that, and that's okay. That's just who I am. If you want to be an effective coach, if you want the people you're coaching to be effective people and leaders in the world, they need high levels of all of this. So if I'm confident in myself, but I'm not connected to others, then I'm going to lose them. It's all going to be all about me. Even if it's not about arrogance, it's still going to be all about me, and I'm going to lose them. If I'm connected to others, and this is the place where coaches fall in a lot, if I'm connected to others and really deeply caring and supportive of them, but not so confident in myself, like I'm not, and confident in yourself, again, it's not about self-belief. It's about, am I willing to put myself out there in the same way that they are? So if I prioritize their needs over my needs, then it's going to be all about them. And they're going to lose the value of my input. And I'm going to get burnt out because I'm constantly doing what I need to do to please them rather than really to help them. So we need confidence in self and connection to others to both be really strong. Then a third is commitment to purpose. And I'm going to go into a lot more detail about commitment to purpose, so I'm not going to belabor it here. And then the fourth is emotional courage. And again, I'm going to go into more detail about those. So we have time today to delve a little bit more deeply in the commitment to purpose and the emotional courage. And that's very connected to coaching. So commitment to purpose is less about having a brilliant vision and more about where am I spending my time and my energy. And I'm going to share with you in a second the number one thing I see coaches do wrong, which has to do with the first 30 seconds of their of the coaching conversation that they have. And that first 30 seconds wastes almost always at least half of a coaching session, if not all of the coaching session. And it has to do with commitment to purpose. So I want to share a quick story. I was coaching the CEO of an organization, and it was a nanotechnology firm, and they were running into quality problems, which they had dealt with quarter after quarter after quarter. I've been working with them. By the way, this is a client where over a period of 6 years when I worked with them, their revenue went from 200 million to over $1 billion, and their stock price went from about $19 to over $107. And the CEO attributes our work to a big piece of that. So what was it that we did? Like, how did the coaching become so valuable? They had this quality issue, and I'd been in strategy offsites with them. They had dealt with it time and time again, and nothing had changed. So before this last offsite, I said to the CEO, I can solve this for you in 1 quarter, but you have to be willing to do what I'm about to say. And he said, all right, what's that? I said, you have to go in there and you have to say, the only thing I care about in this quarter is quality, and we are not going to ship. They made big tools. They made electron microscopes. So not shipping an electron microscope meant losing at least $1 million of revenue. And so if they weren't shipping a bunch of them, that would be millions of dollars of revenue. And they in a lot of cases, if they were selling to institutions or academia, they got grants. So if they didn't ship the tool when they said they were going to ship it, they would lose the sale completely. It's not just about moving it from one quarter to another. So I said, you have to go in there and you have to say, we are not going to ship a tool unless it is completely ready to be shipped and gone through all the quality checks. And people aren't going to believe you at first, so they're not going to react, but you're going to stay really, really strong about it. And I know this sounds like I'm being very, very directive with the CEO, and I kind of was in this situation, but the choice was his to whether to do it or not. But I was like, you have to commit 100% to this if you're going to do it. And it means you're going to give up revenue and you're going to give up sales, and there's going to be pain, but it's going to end. And are you willing, I said, to withstand the pain of the pushback from your people, of the pushback from the street, and of actual, pain of like your bonus is going to get hit by this. And he said, I'm in. So we go into that meeting and he says, what I just said, right? We're not going to ship a tool. And people said, okay, I think that's a great idea, right? Which meant to me, like they didn't get it yet. So then the head of sales said, of course, the ones we've already committed to customers, like this is really important moving forward, but the ones we've committed to customers, we're still gonna ship, right? And he said, no, we're not. And now, the head of sales starts shifting in his seat, which is a great sign. And he goes, but look, we've made these commitments. And he's like, well, we're either going to have to make sure that the tools are completely prepared, or we're going to have to apologize and tell them that we're not going to be able to fulfill that commitment because the tool's not ready. Because you know what? It's not. And they said, well, hold on. We have, values. Like our values say, customer service. And here's the thing about values, guys. Everybody's values are always great. They're almost never pertinent until you have to choose between values. And you find out what the real value of the organization is when you have to choose between values. So we also have a value about quality, right? And this is where the CEO chose between those values. He said, first of all, long-term, we're going to be satisfying clients, customers. And short-term, quality is going to be more important than every other value that we have, more important than profitability and revenue, et cetera. And the head of sales says, what are you going to tell this? We can't do that. The street, we have, we've set expectations for the street. Now he's getting red and congested in the face. And both I and the CEO got happy because we knew there was a change happening. If the guy's not getting upset, there's not going to be a change. So the CEO said exactly what he should say, which is, the street's my problem. I'm going to worry about the street. You let me worry about the street. Your job, that's my job. Your job is to make sure I only have to have this conversation with the street for one quarter. I do not want to have this conversation again. And this head of sales goes, what about our bonuses? And was like, well, your bonuses are going to go down. And so's mine, by the way. So, but we're going to do it. In one quarter, right? And this is commitment to purpose. Commitment to purpose is, will I focus at the exclusion of things that are less important and not everything. Someone told me once, yeah, we believe in priorities as CEO. We believe in priorities. That's why we have so many of them in our organization. That's why we have 10 priorities, because we think priorities are really important. And I said, look, 10 priorities defies the definition of priority. Like priority is singular. What is the one thing that's going to make the biggest difference to growing your business or to being effective or to achieving what your dreams, or what is the number one thing that's going to make the biggest difference? Focus on that and get a B in everything else. Get an A+ in that, get a B in everything else. And that's how you get massive traction on what's most important, right? They dealt with it in one quarter, and you know the rest of the story, right? Stock price from $19 to over $107. So that's what commitment purpose is. Now I'm gonna go an organization. This is often what I see. Lots of people who are actually productive, who are all moving in different organizations. This is, by the way, a problem that I see with coaching in organizations. And it's why I've designed methodology specifically for coaching in organizations. Because what happens is, if I'm coaching any one of these individual arrows, coaching works. They're going to get better. But if they're working in a different direction than other arrows, we're going to make the problem worse. If we coach 3 of these arrows, we coach 3 of these people, and we're good coaches, and those 3 people get more effective, they're going to exacerbate the problem of misalignment in the organization, not solve it. So what we have to do, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the process of this, is we have to identify and build the big arrow, and then we have to follow a coaching process that helps both align people and help them become more effective at moving forward in the direction, so that ultimately their growth and development and movement moves the whole ship, moves the enterprise. Right? So our goal in coaching isn't just to help an individual be successful if we're coaching in an organization. Our goal in coaching is to help the individual, help the organization be successful. And to do that, we have to create alignment. We don't have a lot of time now to go into the processes for that, but that's a critically important piece. So I'm going to ask you 6 questions. In the book, I have 12. That I go into Commit to Purpose, but I just want to give you a sense of a few of these. And ask yourself, how good am I at this? Or ask yourself, related to your client, how good is your client at this? I give my all to achieve what I'm most passionate about. I'm clear about the small number of things, the very small number of things that move the needle on what matters most. I focus my time and energy on those small number of things, and I let go of everything else. I have a clear and reliable process that keeps me focused on those things and letting go of everything else. I'm willing to repeat myself until I'm bored in order to reinforce what matters most, especially if I'm a leader. And I'm willing to stay silent about everything else in order to reinforce. So commitment to purpose has as much to do about where I am putting my energy than it does, and what I'm not putting my energy into, as it does about the vision or how brilliant the mission is and all that stuff. It's much more on the ground. This is, by the way, where coaching can be incredibly useful. So, so here, I promised you, this is the number one thing that almost every coach does wrong. What do you want to talk about today is how we start our conversations. And they talk about what they want to talk about. The problem is, what they talk about is almost never what's most important. What they often talk about is what's latest, what's most recent, what's annoying, right? The reason they hire a coach is they want to move forward on what's most important to them. The reason they need a coach is because they generally aren't focusing on what's most important to them. When you say, what do you want to talk about today? You're inviting them to talk about whatever's on their mind, which, because they haven't been getting traction, is predictably not what they need to talk about. Right? This is a huge point. So what am I suggesting? I'm suggesting that you do not start your coaching calls that. What I'm suggesting is you start your coaching call by saying, let's read again, what's your big arrow? You identify with them what is the most important thing for them to achieve over the next 12 months. And you start by saying, read it to me. What's your big arrow? What is your big arrow? And then you say, what opportunity or challenge should we discuss that will help you get traction on? So this is like a small shift, but it changes everything. Because how, if you're, I'm sure you've read about this, but if your compass is off by half a degree, it doesn't make a difference for the first 5 feet, but it certainly makes a difference for the first 5 miles, right? Because the more off you are, the wider and wider and wider the gap gets. So focus the client on what's most important, and then make sure that the coaching you're doing is related to what's most important. Okay, I want to jump to emotionally courageous. I'm going to do this pretty quickly, and then I'm going to open it up for questions. Emotional courage, the willingness to feel. The story that I love to tell around this is when I was having a hard time writing. I wanted to write, I've written 17 or contributed to 17 books, but I haven't written any fiction. I really wanted to write fiction. I wasn't writing fiction. And I mentioned that to a friend of mine who said, well, why do you think you're not writing fiction? And I said, honestly, because I think I'm scared. Like, I know I'm a good writer, but I think I'm a pretty awful fiction writer. And I think every time I sit down, I'm like, I start writing and I don't like what comes out. And my friend, she laughed and she said, oh, and she said something brilliant. You think you're supposed to be able to write without feeling scared. And I thought, first of all, that's not fair because that's my line. But second of all, you're right. Like I'm trying, you're right. Like if I wait until I stop feeling in order to do something, I'm never going to do something. So when we coach people to try to like, how do we get over your fear of speaking? That's a mistake. What you have to do is to try to get them to speak while they're afraid. Because if you can get them to speak while they're afraid, then they will build their capacity, their emotional courage, and their capacity to act in the context of emotions. Our goal is not to get rid of emotions. Our goal is to be able to act in the context of emotions. So how do we cultivate emotional courage? Again, I'm going to give you these. Just ask yourself this question. At any given moment, can I identify what I'm feeling and where I'm feeling it? That helps tremendously, because if I can identify where I'm feeling it, I've no longer become the emotion. I'm separate from the emotion. And when I'm separate from the emotion, I can manage myself through it. Pain and discomfort don't dissuade me from doing what needs to be done. I regularly feel a wide range of emotions at the same time, some of them contradictory. I routinely take calculated and bold risks. I intentionally put myself in uncomfortable situations. I regularly try new ways of acting, even when it doesn't feel authentic. These are things, first of all, this is an assessment. Like if you do these things well, you're probably pretty emotionally courageous. If you don't do these things often, or if your clients aren't doing these things, the truth is you're probably not. And you can use building it. And the way you build emotional courage is by using emotional courage. It's like any physical muscle. The way you get good at it is by using it. And so you have to put yourself in these situations. Now, what are some ways that we can help do that as coaches? So one, and also how do you identify when it might be missing? So one is, if you're talking about options for things for somebody to do, let's say they're having a difficult conversation. I have this thing called invisibility cloak. Like if you could put an invisibility cloak on you and do whatever you wanted to do or say whatever you wanted to say, what would it be? And that's a way of getting them to really identify, like, here's the thing I'm not saying or I'm not doing, right? If there were no consequences to saying it, I would yell at the person, shut up! Okay, great. So now we know that what you're holding back is asking for space. I made a leap there, right? And the leap I made, I learned from, acting as a therapist as much as a coach. But if people are not doing something, then if they want something to stop, then it's much more useful as a coach, as a therapist, for us to help people figure out what it is that they want, what they're longing for, as opposed to what they're dreading. And then we can get them to go for what they're longing for. So if the person wants to yell, shut up, my question is, oh, so you want space? Like, what do you want? Like, why do you want them to shut up? What do you want to do that you want them to shut up? Very similar is what's gone through your mind that you haven't shared with me yet. Not that you haven't done, but that is so scary you haven't even mentioned it to me, right? That just having them tell you what that thing is emotionally courageous. They're saying out loud something they were afraid to say out loud. So that's a low level of emotional courage, but still very, very high for a lot of people. Let me, in this context of a confidential private conversation, tell you something I haven't even said out loud. Real-time traction is the gold standard. If you're telling me you're really afraid of writing an email to someone and I'm coaching you, what I'm going to tell you is, great, open your laptop, let's write the email now. Write it with me right now. And they're going to say, no, I don't need to do that. Oh yeah, I know, but let's do it anyway. Why don't you write it? And they go, and say, great, what are you feeling? What is that feeling? Because that's the feeling you're going to have to get used to if you're going to move through action that's difficult. And finally, a provocative suggestion that they might push back against, but then come up with something else, which is, why don't you just yell, shut up? Or why don't you just quit? Or why, and they're, I can't do that. It's like, okay, so why can't you do that? The goal isn't to get them to accept the provocative reaction. The goal is to get them to react to it. And finally, ladder the change, which is to do something a little easier. And actually asking them what's gone through their mind that they haven't shared yet is one element of laddering the change. It's like, I'm not asking you to do anything. I'm reducing the challenge. How about you just say it out loud, right? Instead of doing this, why don't you do that, right? A little lower. Okay, ready? We're going to wrap up and I'm going to open for questions. But first, we're going to do something that's going to take some emotional courage. So wherever you are, and to give you a sense, I've done this with, in fact, this is me doing this with 5,000 government finance officers. So if I could do this with 5,000 government finance officers, a bunch of coaches in their own private spaces for the most part can do it. So what I'm going to ask you to do is to stand up where you are. And I can't see you, so I'm not going to know if you do this or not. No, you'll have to just, decide if you can do this or not. But stand up where you are, and I'm going to play some music. And Rosemary, if you're, I'm curious can we do a gallery view of people as opposed to, could we do a gallery view of people so that everybody can see each other as opposed to just my screen? I don't know that that works.
Bashir, can we do it?
No.
Was that a no or was that a yes?
No.
No, okay, all right, so we're not gonna be able to see you. Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna turn on the music and I'm gonna ask you to just dance where you are. Nobody can see you, so it's in the privacy, but it still may feel that, it still may feel hard. It still may feel a little weird that you're gonna be just dancing by yourself in your room. Maybe you do this all the time, I don't know. But I'm gonna play the music and I'm gonna suggest and encourage you to, just for a few moments, dance with me. And let yourself dance with a little bit of abandon. And notice everything that feels. Notice how it feels that I've asked you to stand up and you're just about to do it. I could feel myself, I could feel things. I could feel a little heat. I could feel a little stress. I mean, you are gonna be watching me, but notice. Yep, you feel that too, Rosemary?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so that's great. This is what it feels like to act in the world. This is what it feels like to have emotional courage, to be willing to do something. Okay, ready? Here we go. Everybody up and dance. Just wave your arms. Move your body. The truth is that feels so good. I kind of didn't want to stop. So it's really scary a little bit to do beforehand, but once you start doing it and you give yourself over to it, it feels very alive. I hope this was helpful. It's, leading with emotional courage. I think it's in my experience, it's been the sort of missing key that can unlock people's ability to get massive traction on what's most important. And why don't we go to questions and I can stop sharing.
Okay, can you hear me, Peter?
Yep, I can hear you very well. I'm
Okay,
so you just see me.
I have a flood of feedback. People think you are just awesome, fantastic. Their wives join them on the call. They just simply loved it. I've got a whole slew of comments and I have 3 questions from all the slew of comments. So I will start with question number 1. What pushback do you normally get when you have coaching conversations on emotional courage with CEOs?
And sorry, the question is what pushback do I get?
Yeah.
So it's funny because I did a live coaching session demo. I think it was for WBEX, and I was coaching a guy who I've coached before and I know him really well, and he was having he was struggling with a difficult conversation with one of his colleagues, and we talked about it, and he said, "Okay, I got it, great," and I said, "Great, let's role play it." And you see him turn red. And he goes, "I don't need to role play it. I got it." I'm like, "Yeah, but let's role play it anyway." And he goes, "No, Peter, really, I got it." Right? So it's total pushback. So why doesn't he want to role play it? He doesn't want to role play it because he doesn't want to look stupid in front of people. Right? Because it seems like he doesn't, it seems awkward and embarrassing. I can guarantee you that if he doesn't role play it with me, the likelihood of him, and if he's scared or embarrassed to role play it with me, even in front of a bunch of people, then the likelihood that that anybody else, that he will do it when it comes down to actually having the conversation is going to plummet. And so the pushback is, I don't need to do that. I'm smart enough. I got it. Don't worry. I got it. As coaches, we need emotional courage in that moment to say, I know you got it. Let's role play it anyway. And as soon as he role play it, I'm able to point out some things he could do that would make it more effective or stronger. And now we're in the conversation and it's fine. But and I've always felt this, like when I think about the leadership intensive, I move people to places they do not want to go. And what I have seen, and this is the takeaway for all of us as coaches, what I have seen is, if I am not 150% committed to going there myself, there's no way I can lead anybody else who's 20% committed. So I've got to be brave enough to go, this role-playing thing might be stupid, and I don't want to be like the coach that tells my CEO to do something, and the CEO is like, oh, this guy's, this guy's touchy-feely. Like, I'm really interested more and more about exploring spirituality in work that I'm doing with people. And it takes a lot of courage for me to move in that direction. But if I don't put myself in it fully, if I'm tentatively dipping my toe into it, they're not going to jump in. I have to jump in and say, the water's fine here. I'm good. You're safe. I've got you. And then they'll come with us. So the real answer to that question is, we have to be, 100% committed to where we want people to going first where we want people to go.
Okay, next question is, do you have any tips or tricks in coaching a leader who is perceived or demonstrating bullying behavior, and how to develop emotional courage in this type of individual?
Yeah, so first of all, always collect feedback. Like, I think it's really, really important to, if you're hearing that they're perceived or demonstrating bullying behavior, to be able to show them, look, I talked to 20 people, like, you agreed to those people, this is what they're saying. And for you not to be the one to necessarily have to say, this is what I hear, and they go, well, what are you hearing? And you say, well, I can't tell you because that would violate confidentiality. And then you're like in a valueless conversation. The other thing that you can do is, if someone's a bully and perceived as a bully, they will show that bullying with you. They'll bully in whatever way they bully you. They're going to bully you. And at that point, for you to have the emotional courage to be able to go, okay, so the stuff that we talked about that other people are feeling, I'm feeling it now. Can I share with you what my experience is right now that I'm feeling, that you're doing to me, that's making me feel? I mean, I recently did this with the COO of a very large Silicon Valley billion-dollar, public company, and he had that kind of feedback. And he said, and I said, people feel intimidated by you. And he goes, I don't understand. This was very hard for me to do. He goes, I don't understand why they would say that. And I was scared to say this. And I was scared to say this because I realized my own self-image. I don't want to be perceived as someone who's intimidated. But I said, well, let me use myself as an example. I'm feeling intimidated right now. And I'll tell you precisely what you're doing that is making me feel this way. And by the way, my willingness to have that conversation with him completely transformed our relationship in the coaching, because I was willing to have a conversation with him nobody else was, and be discerning and point out what the person was doing that was giving me that feeling. And I said, look, I don't get intimidated easily. Like, I coach CEOs of the biggest companies in the world. Like, and I feel it from you. And here's what I feel.
Yeah, I get a comment from someone saying, my goodness, I wish I had heard this years ago. And we just have 2 minutes left in the session. And would Bashir, could you please put the evaluation link in the chat so that we get the survey evaluation done also? And time for one just quick question is to elaborate a little bit on the impact of culture in emotional courage.
Tell me more what you mean by that, culture and emotional courage.
Catalina.
Like how culture might get in the way of our emotional courage?
Yeah, or the impact of culture. If you're having emotional courage, implementing emotional courage, how does that impact on the culture of the workplace?
Well, certainly in emotion, you create a workplace. I think maybe they're asking something, how culture could be in the way is what I'm hearing.
Yes, that's it.
Right.
That's
okay.
it.
So I think this is very, very valid because, not only culture, I would say, but like there's culture, there's our own cultures that we're coming from, there's the larger culture, there's like when I think about people acting in the world, I'm a white man. I'm Jewish, so that might make it a little harder, right? But I'm a white man. I could pretty much do or say, I've been taught since I was a child that the world cares what I think, and I can go off and talk and say, and the people I've looked at, the presidents, like I look at the people who have power in the world, and I identify with them, and I think, okay, so the world cares what I think. But if I were a Black woman or a Muslim in this country, or a person of color, I don't have so to act ambitiously in the world when the people around me aren't. First of all, I may not have had that experience that I can even do that, and maybe from a young age I've been taught I better not do that because it's going to get me in trouble. But also the people around me aren't expecting or wanting me to do that, and so I don't. There's not an easy answer to this. I want to say it's like what we can do as coaches is to be aware of it for ourselves and for other people. And what we need in those moments is emotional courage to break through those boundaries. We need emotional courage. I've needed emotional courage to look at it and look at the myself and the ways in which, like, I would never say that I was racist. And now I'm reading a bunch of stuff and I'm thinking, like, I'm not racist in that overt way, but just like by living the way I live as a white man, there's an embedded racism in what I do. And so to appreciate that and to understand that and to learn from it takes emotional courage. I have to be willing to see myself in a way I don't really want to see myself. And unless I do that, though, then I can't learn and I can't grow. And I think we need a lot of emotional courage for all of that.
Well, thank you, Peter. I have got so many accolades. I don't know if you can see them all in the chat line. That it was a really great presentation. Everyone's just simply appreciated it. I myself, I'm blown away, but that's not a surprise. And that's why I am so grateful that you generously accepted my invitation to come and speak to us. And my takeaway, it's going to be my mantra for a while now, is that if you can feel it, feel it, feel it, you can do almost anything. And so that's my takeaway. Thank you for this afternoon. Thank you for your time. And I will get in touch with you later, Peter.
Great. It's my pleasure. Thank you all. I am reading these, and I so appreciate the chat. I've saved the chat, so I'll look at it when I have more time. But I so appreciate it, and yeah, and it's kind of enlivened me a little bit around, like, I think I have to do more work with coaches because that's what I do and I really like it. So
well, for a virtual presentation, this was really courageous and great. So
thank you.
Okay, bye. Have a good rest of the day, Peter.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody else. Don't forget to fill out your survey.
Yeah, and if you could share that with me afterwards, I'd love to see that also.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you,
so
Peter.
much. Thanks everybody
Bye.
for taking the time.